Welcome to a little mini-series that I like to call Character Quest. This is where I take a look at some complex and interesting characters that don't really get talked about. That, or people just don't understand their complexity. Well, folks, we've made it this far, haven't we? Character Quest is all done, except for the one that I promised last time. Yes, as I've said, there was one character I just happened to come across and I couldn't resist talking about them now. So, let's just get right into it. Do you guys remember that movie, Spy Kids? Growing up, this was one of my absolute favorite movies. Directed by Robert Rodriguez, this 2001 hit was a very big landmark when it comes to children's movies. And it spawned a ton of sequels given its success: Spy Kids 2, Island of Lost Dreams, Spy Kids 3D/Spy Kids 3, Game Over, and the other one that nobody knows or cares about. Not a bad legacy. Despite this film's minuscule budget, it managed to get a lot of good acting talent like Alan Cumming, Antonio Banderas, or Cheech Marin. And even if the first three films are really clunky and have some weird parts to them, I still consider them great children's movies. Heck, when I watched them back again, I found myself almost as entertained as I was when I was a kid watching these. Yes, someday would love to talk about all three of the original Spy Kids movies, but right now I'm just going to be focusing on Spy Kids 1. Or Spy Kids, the one that started it all. The story is about Carmen and Junie Cortez, whose parents are actually spies working for the agency, the OSS. Their parents have decided to go on one last mission, but end up getting abducted by a crazy children's show host who has taken a bunch of former OSS agents prisoner, mutated them, turned their minds to mush, and is using them as mere novelties on his children's TV show. Now, it's up to Carmen and Junie to save their parents, even though they don't really have any idea of what's going on. Not to mention, they also have to pick up what their parents were trying to accomplish in the first place: stopping the villains from creating a robot child army to take over the world with. As I've stated earlier, this film still stands the test of time in my opinion, but I would say one element more than all the others. More specifically, one character. One character really stood out to me as something very interesting, compelling, and somewhat thought-provoking. And no, I didn't grasp this when I was a kid either. I never picked up on it. Who is it? Well, that would be the aforementioned children's host himself, Fegan Floop. Floop is the host of the children's show Floop's Fooglies, which of course is the TV show where all the captured OSS agents have to spend their time. Just look at the fear in their eyes. They don't know what's gonna happen to them. Any minute they're deemed not useful anymore, they're done for. Throughout most of the film, Floop is seen as the antagonist. He seems to be the one who wants to build a robot army. He seems to be the one who's okay with letting all these OSS agents be tortured and used as toys, essentially. And he seems to be the one who's the driving force of all the bad things happening. But I said seems, because as it turns out, he's not the one who's doing all of this. It was his sidekick, Alexander Minion, who was a former OSS agent who was cast out because of his evil tendencies. So he ended up aligning himself with Floop, and the two have been doing dastardly deeds ever since. Or have they? Every single scene in this movie really indicates that Floop wants nothing to do with this plan. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about the army. He doesn't care about the third brain. He doesn't care about having all the OSS agents. Well, he does, but he doesn't like it. What he really wants to do is his show. That's what he cares about. Floop's goal in life is essentially to be Tim Burton crossed with Mr. Rogers. A good role model for children and someone that they can look up to and call their friend, even if they've never really met. He just wants to be a good influence, and this is stated by his song. Oddly, despite his sunny demeanor, Floop has a very pessimistic view of the world. The way he sees it, everybody's always out to get you, and there are bad people at every corner. But he wants to be the light that cuts through the darkness. He wants to make people laugh, smile, make them happy, make them learn. He wants innocence and goodness to prevail. He's a creatively driven artist who just got mixed in with the wrong people. The way I see it is this. This is constantly seen throughout the rest of the film too. Floop never seems to manage to stay on subject when they're talking about the plan. It's always Minion that has to redirect him to it. Because for Floop, it always ends up coming back to his show. Still, Floop is the front man for this evil scheme. Whenever something goes wrong, he's the one to blame. Whenever some catastrophe happens, it's Floop that's going to be held responsible. Even if he's not doing anything, It's always him. And this is going to be even worse for him when the plan succeeds. Floop himself even acknowledges this. He says that even though he doesn't really have any responsibility with this plan, because his face was plastered all over it, and he seems to be the front man in this deal, everybody's gonna blame him for all the bad things that have happened, for all the destruction that the robot army has caused. But he doesn't want any of that. That's the exact opposite of what he wants. Floop's whole goal in life was just to make people happy. And he can't do that because the people he surrounded himself with are evil, nasty people. The same people he warned about in his song. And it's not that he didn't know this either. He knew exactly what was happening. After all, Minion was the one who suggested all of the terrible ideas that Floop didn't like. The most notable of these would be the Fooglies. Once all the OSS agents have been mutated, they have no purpose to them. So Floop can just use them for whatever he wants. But he doesn't really like that. He likes that they get to be a part of his show and that they get to help make people happy. But you can very clearly see that he's not comfortable with the fact that he's using prisoners and people that are being held against their will. Merely even talking about their actual identity just makes him uncomfortable. Nevertheless, what Minion says goes. It's not really explained why Floop has to do everything that Minion says, but personally, I have my own theory. See, I think Floop was having a hard time with his show. I think he was trying anything he could to get it off the ground. As stated earlier, he wanted to be the big shining ray of light in this world full of darkness and misery. But he couldn't do it on his own. So Minion found him and came up with a plan. I'll help this guy if he helps me. However, the way I'm helping him also helps me. Because if you look at everything he's doing for Floop, it all just helps him in the end. The captured OSS agents get to be a part of Floop's Fooglies, but they also get out of the way so they don't have to hurt Minion's plan. The robot army gives Floop more attention and more revenue for his show, but it also falls right into Minion's evil plot. He can't back out now though, it's too late. It's too late. He's already got himself in this far. And the minute he tries to get out of it, it's over, locked in the virtual room, waiting for his reputation and everything he's worked so hard for to come crashing down. Because imagine if you were a little kid watching Mr. Rogers, only to find out that Mr. Rogers was actually funding some kind of terrorist organization overseas. How would you feel about that if you were such a big fan of his? You'd be destroyed, wouldn't you? Someone so kind and innocent, someone who was trying as hard as they could to make people smile, just turned out to be a horrible criminal. And let's go a little off topic a bit to talk about this. Junie felt exactly the same way. He didn't have any friends at school, all the kids just picked on him. He really considered Floop to be his only friend, and every day would wish that he could go to Floop's world so that he could finally be with people who understood him. So naturally, when he finds out that it was Floop who supposedly was responsible for his parents' abduction, he was in complete denial, saying things like the fabulous Floop would never do that. But alas, they found out that Floop did have that connection. But nevertheless, Junie stayed loyal. Junie knew that Floop couldn't have done this. Even if all the evidence pointed right to it, there was something about Floop's innocence and kindness that seemed so genuine. Something that pointed to the conclusion that Floop was innocent after all, and that it was Minion who was evil. And you know what? Junie is right. If you pay close attention to the film, you can pick up exactly on what he sees. Whenever Floop's talking about his show, he's bouncy, he's happy, he's excited. That is when he's not facing writer's block, then he's just completely frustrated. But when he's talking about the evil plan, he's stilted, he's cold, he's uncomfortable, he's nervous. He doesn't really know what he's talking about. He has to take notes from Minion, who's silently cueing him on what to say. Being bad just isn't natural for Floop, and when given the very first chance, he fights as hard as he can to undo all of the damage. And in the end, he's rewarded for it. His children's show was at number 2, and he was looking for that one thing that would bring it to the number 1 spot, and in the end, he finds it. It needs children. And he uses 2 of the robot duplicates to be his sidekicks, them and the now foogly-eyed Minion, and they end up bringing it to number 1, and he's able to reach more people and make more people happy, but that's not all. He's also programmed the rest of the robot army to go around doing good, stopping fires, saving people from destroyed buildings, that kind of stuff. It may have been a long, hard road, but in the end, Floop got what he always wanted. to leave the world better than when he found it. But that's not quite the end of Floop. No, he actually does get some cameos in the other two films. Well, the other two films that matter, at least. In Island of Lost Dreams, he's shown that Minion is actually still working for him and seems to be decently happy, even if things are a little floopy for his taste, as he says. And something really strikes me here. Minion's not evil, he willingly helps the OSS stop Donegan Giggles, who, for reference, is the villain of the second film. By all accounts, Minion should be furious with Carmen and Junie. After all, it's not only their fault that he lost, but it's also their fault that he's now a mutant forever. But no, he's changed, he's reformed. What does this have to do with Floop? Well, let me tell you. Floop is such a good guy and has such a kind heart that he didn't turn Minion away. Think about it. With Minion in this deformed state, he could not function in society. He'd be seen as a freak at best, and run out of town at worst. And despite all of the misery, all of the trauma, all of the abuse and using that Minion has put Floop through, Floop has decided to open up his heart and give Minion another chance. He gave him a role on his show and let him be prosperous. And maybe I'm just overanalyzing it a little bit, but it seems like this has actually gotten to Minion. It seems like Minion has actually decided to be more like Floop and turn to the good side. Even though he didn't deserve it, he got nothing but kindness in return. I guess that's just the power of Floop. Whether he's being used as a frontman for an evil scheme, or is just trying to make the world a happier, smilier place, Fegan Floop will always be there, ready to show his art to the world. Well, folks, that was Character Quest, and thank you so much for coming along this ride. It's been a lot of fun. Next week, we're going to be talking about a show I've already discussed in the past. Something that I touched briefly upon in that review, but now have learned the full story. What is it? Well, you'll just have to wait and see now, won't you? But what'd you guys think of this video? And what'd you guys think of Character Quest? Which Spy Kids film is your favorite? Comment below and let me know because, hey, as always, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. Alright everybody, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Just remember, it's a cruel, cruel world, all you little boys and girls, and some mean, nasty people want to have you for their supper.